This game should not exist, but I'm playing it, so it does. And you're here watching it, so it does. But it's wrong. It's wrong on so many levels. This is the PC Engine Files, and we're playing Super Mario Brothers. Now, I suppose you could say that it really doesn't exist because it was never officially released for the PC Engine and certainly not on the TurboGrafx 16. I don't even know if a hue card of this exists. I suspect this is somebody's homebrew project done completely from scratch, although I could see some person maybe manufacturing a hue card and putting it in a package and selling it as Super Mario Brothers, which would be completely without the permission of Nintendo, let alone the homebrew author, let alone any royalties going to any of the license holders. So it would be a very bad idea, but that hasn't stopped a lot of bootleg games and a lot of bootleg Famiclones from getting produced and released over the years. Bad ideas do happen all the time. I just found this one randomly while looking around for TurboGrafx 16 games that I hadn't reviewed, and when I saw Super Mario Brothers for PC Engine, I thought this was going to be a joke, a lark, a troll. I didn't believe this would actually work or be real, but much like the fact that somebody ported Mega Man over to TurboGrafx 16, it's real and it works. Although whether or not it works is debatable because the music runs way too fast and I haven't found any way to control it or slow it down with OpenEMU. I don't even know if that emulator is sophisticated enough to change the hertz or the frame rates or any of those things. So maybe this is somehow a PAL standard and that's why it's running super fast, but I don't think so. I think it was just the programmer's attempt to recreate the soundtrack at a different pitch and tempo as best they could. Or maybe they were working with a PAL source copy and copied what they heard, and that was too fast, so this is too fast. In fact, the Reddit thread I could find about this game seemed to come to the same conclusion. I quote from Shiny Plastic Bag, who was the original poster. I'm fairly stunned by the unofficial port of Super Mario Bros. There are a few other Famicom games that got ported over, and they were released in 1994. It's not perfect, the colors are a bit off, there are graphical glitches, and the sound is unbearable. Oh, and it seems to be based on a 50Hz version because it runs way too fast on my system. Arugulas replied and said, "You should see the Sega Genesis port of Super Mario Bros. It is in most respects very close to the NES game, but then you listen to the music and it sounds like the 7th inning stretch at a baseball game." Whoops! So that does raise an interesting question here. If this was quote-unquote released in 1994, then who did it and why? So I dug deeper and I found a post at NES Dev, and C. Covell in that thread said, on March 19, 2006, I might add, he said, NES games can be hacked with considerable effort to run on PC Engine. Those NES hacks are from Image, a Finnish cracking group. Since Image were Finnish, they used the PAL ROM of Super Mario Bros. For their PC Engine conversion, thus the colors are a bit off and the speed is wrong on NTSC systems such as PC Engine TurboGrafx 16. Image also hid a few pictures at the end of their ROMs. Go have a look for them in some tile editors. chrismcovell.com. So that explains why this exists. They did it as a lark. They did it to prove that they could do it. They did it just to test the limits of their cracking and hacking ability. Can we make an NES game run on a PC Engine? Yes we can. Do we care if it looks and sounds the way people in other countries would expect it to look and sound? No, we don't. Because we're Finnish, and we're making this for other Finnish gamers. So they didn't think about this being disseminated all over the internet, all around the world. And yet, because it's the internet, it has been and it's out there. And you can play it now too if you can find it. Not telling you where, because obviously this is a bootleg Nintendo game running on a PC engine, so Nintendo can't be entirely happy that this exists. But you don't have to look very hard. If you type in Super Mario Bros. PC engine on something other than a Google search engine, you will run across this in no time flat. And just be warned that once you play it, the physics are going to feel off, the sound is going to grate on your ears, and the experience is going to be subpar compared to your memories of it on an original NES or Famicom. But as a novelty, as a curiosity, it does exist and you can play it. And I would recommend at least trying it, but definitely do not buy it. If you see someone selling a physical copy of this, whether it's on a HuCard or a CD-ROM or any other form of media, you should not pay for a copy of this because that is blatant theft and bootleggery at the highest level, and I cannot condone that. But try it for free in emulation or on an EverDrive or on a Super SD3, whatever form of media you think would be appropriate to try something like this. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This is the PC Engine Files. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again next week with another video and probably not another bootleg game. But hey, if it's fascinating enough, who knows? Maybe we'll look into the existence of more bootleg NES games running on PCE. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This is the PC Engine Files, and today we are looking at Makai Prince Dorabocchan, or as I like to call it, the prequel tales of Spike McFang. You may have heard of the Twisted Tales of Spike McFang. It is one of the most infamously expensive games that you can buy for Super Nintendo. Not the most expensive, but certainly up there on the higher end of the scale. I almost regret saying things like that, given that it can make things go up in price even further, but at the same time, I'm not one of those 1 million YouTube subscribers or 100K with a plaque on the wall, so I don't think me commenting on what Spike McFang goes for will affect it that much more than the volatility of the market already does. Currently, Spike McFang goes for 157 loose, 270 complete, and 411 new. By comparison, this game, the prequel, goes for anywhere from $50 to $100. I've seen it on the low end, complete for $50 with $10 shipping from Japan, and I've seen very nice looking copies that have been well kept and well preserved for the higher end. So it's actually one of the more affordable PC Engine games, all things given, especially if it was better known that Spike McFang is a sequel to this game. Maybe it would be a lot more expensive than it currently is. You can tell right away it's a Spike McFang game because you're playing the exact same character. He's a little vampire boy with a top hat, and he can duck under the top hat. He can't throw it in this game, but when he's ducking under it, he can throw tomatoes, which act like bombs, and that's useful for taking out some of the bigger enemies that you face. The jumping physics are a little bit wonky. You will get used to it after a while, but you can't adjust your jump. When you hit the jump button, you go all the way up. You can't tap it a little for a small jump. You can't hold it for a big jump. You hit the button, he's going to jump as high as he possibly can for the full duration of the jump. At least you can kind of maneuver him while he's jumping in the air, but still it would have been nice to have a little more control over the jump. It's not an unbearable problem, it's just something you have to adjust to. There's a little bit of a Bonk's Big Adventure mechanic going on here with certain items that you pick up. They increase your power, and when Spike McFang is fully powered up like this, his outfit changes and he can shoot projectiles that travel a great distance. But if you take too many hits, you lose the power-ups and go back down to your previous state. If the video and the audio are slightly out of sync in the gameplay session, I am sorry. I did the best I could, but I ended up playing this game for quite a long time, and unfortunately they did get a little out of sync when I was capturing it, though they do come back together by the end of this video, or pretty close to it. If I could capture both at the exact same time on the emulator, it would be great, but I have to use QuickTime Player for the video and Audio Hijack for the audio. There doesn't seem to be any simple Macintosh solution for capturing all of them at once. I could always play it on the TurboGrafx 16 through the Super SD System 3, but then I never feel like the video quality is quite up to what I want for an episode of the PC Engine Files when I just point a camera at the TV. You always get that wire effect where it shows the lines of the screen kind of making a rainbow shimmering pattern on the television. At some point, maybe I'll just have a capture card, but I'm not even sure that would be the preferred solution for Super SD System 3 because I have the first version, not the upgraded HD version, so I would either be outputting it directly through a Sega Genesis cord, or what I currently do, which I know causes some color distortion, I would be outputting it through the Sega Genesis Model 2 cord to one of those Sega Genesis to HDMI converters. I think the one I have is by Hyperkin. So it does output in HD to my television, but I don't think the colors are 100% accurate after being passed through that device, and I wouldn't necessarily be comfortable with the video quality of that either. So not really a good solution except to capture the video in emulation. Now, Spike McFang has these stone statues that come along and help him every now and then, which is absolutely necessary in this game because it's a scrolling platformer, but some of their ideas of platforming are a little strange. Like, you'll drop from really great heights. Obviously, you don't take fall damage, which is a good thing, but you'll also have to ascend to great heights at times, and even with the very long jump that Spike McFang has, he can't jump nearly the distances required, so you'll have to ride the statue all the way up, or sometimes you'll be in an area where you can't reach the section below and the statue will have to jump upside down, bashing its head into the ground repeatedly until it makes a hole for you to enter the area. And how do you summon the statues? There's a little dragon with a bell around its neck that flies by, which just immediately makes me think of Zelda and Irene getting mad at when you ring the bell in that Game Grumps video. Come on, Irene. Like I never heard that one before. Just get on the fucking broom. Yeah, it does look like that to me when you're summoning the statues by jumping up and touching the dragon to ring his little bell. Or you might think of that old song, you could ring my bell, ring my bell. Anyway, this boss is really weird. So far you've been battling these little cloves of garlic and these little monsters, and all of a sudden you've got this cybernetic thing, looks like a cat crossed with a robot, and it's actually easier if you jump on its head and duck and throw the bombs, because then the bombs land on its head and do a lot of damage. Unfortunately, it'll jump up and mash you into the ceiling to knock you off, so that only works for so long, but it's the most effective strategy I found for fighting this boss. I would say this is a very good, fun, enjoyable platforming game for PC Engine. Probably even go so far as to say it's underrated, just because I really don't see people talk about this when they talk about PC Engine games, and I'm just surprised at that, given that it's actually part of the Spike McFang, I don't know if you would go so far as to call it series, but games featuring the Makai Prince. It's certainly not the only one. Besides this game and Twisted Tales of Spike McFang, they also appeared in Super Naxat Open, which was a golf game for Super Famicom. So there are no less than 3 games in this series, and I think these characters have been featured in other Taxan/Naxat games. So it's just one of those lost in localization things, I guess, because only one of those games came out in the United States and wasn't printed in great quantities and became a sought-after collector's item as a result when people started trying to complete their collections post-SNES era when the games originally came out. There was probably a time when you could have walked into a Funko Land or something like that and bought a used copy of Twisted Tales of Spike McFang for $5-10, but those days are long gone. So maybe do yourself a favor, while this game is still modestly priced. I mean, $50 isn't cheap, don't get me wrong, but compared to Spike McFang, it's certainly more accessible. And might be more accessible literally too, because the gameplay mechanics are much simpler here. You don't have to worry about throwing your hat or moving in 4 directions. I guess you could argue 8 directions, but I usually just move up, down, left, right. And you don't have to do the RPG elements like collecting keys and items and cards and whatnot that you do in Spike McFang. It's a very straightforward game. You platform left to right, up and down. You collect the items, you destroy the monsters, you avoid the, how should I say, the perils of being a Dracula boy. Because, like, water hurts you, garlic hurts you, certain items that the enemies drop are bad for your health. Like the red ones you can pick up because they're like miniature tomatoes, but the pink ones, don't touch those because they actually damage your health. They must be infused with holy water or something. Bottom line, try this one. Find a copy of it if you don't want to spend the $50 because I always say that, and I'm going to stand by that. Try before you buy. With retro game prices increasing all the time and ridiculous things that we've seen this year, like a sealed Super Mario 64 selling for $1.5 million at auction, which a lot of people think was fake anyway because there was probably a shill bidder for the actual auction site driving up the price and making whoever actually won it pay more to win. If the winning bidder was even legitimate, which we don't know. But I can honestly tell you $1.5 million for a sealed Super Mario 64 is a joke as far as I'm concerned, because there was a day and time when I could have bought 10 of those at Toys R Us when they were going out of business. And I mean, not the big bankruptcy liquidation, just one local TRU that closed, because we had two in the town where I lived in. One closed and the other stayed open for another 10-15 years until the entire chain went out of business. But when that first one closed, they had a liquidation sale. They were getting rid of all their N64 stock, because this is back in the time where GameCube had just come out. And I went in there and man, I got so many N64 games, but I only got one of each in the liquidation sale. I got one Conker's Bad Fur Day, I got one Super Mario 64, so on and so forth. I wasn't buying them to resell them decades down the road. It didn't even occur to me to do that. And I don't feel bad that I broke the seal on my Super Mario 64 because I don't think it would sell for $1.5 million today if I'd kept it shrink wrapped. I'm very skeptical of that. I'm very skeptical of the winning bid on that. I'm very skeptical of people who hoard rare video games thinking that they will someday be worth 10 times what they paid for them now. Those markets collapse. We see it all the time. Coin collecting, that collapsed. Stamps, that collapsed. Those things have actually held value better than things like Elvis Presley memorabilia. That collapsed hugely when those buyers aged out and their families liquidated their collections and no new collectors were coming in buying Elvis stuff. So that stuff goes for a song compared to what it used to. And someday all of us in this hobby will age out too, and all of our stuff will be sent to a Goodwill or a thrift store or liquidated by our families, and then all these things that people think are worth hundreds or thousands of dollars will be selling for pennies on the dollar compared to what they were worth, because there will be so much stuff that floods the market. So if you're thinking that's an investment, I would say buy stocks or bonds instead. But even that's a risk. I mean, companies do go bankrupt. Companies get into financial scandals. Look what happened to Enron. So there's really no such thing as a safe investment. What you should buy isn't an investment. It should be things you enjoy playing and are going to have fun with. And I think Makai Prince Dorabocchan is something you'll have fun with. So is Twisted Tales of Spike McFang. I just can't recommend paying the price for it when there are more affordable ways to play it. Although if there's ever a reprint on it through somebody like Limited Run Games that sells it complete in box for $50-$60, I'd probably get that. I could understand that. That would be worth it because they'd pack in some nice extras and make it a really premium product, and it would sell complete in box for a third of what the full game does. Anyway, I kind of got off topic there, but I do like Makai Prince Dorabocchan, and I think it's a fun game. I would play it, emulate it, maybe buy it if you really enjoy it after you've tried it, and go with it in the future, because it will be fun repeatedly. It seems like a very quality PC Engine platforming game. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This is the PC Engine Files. Thank you for watching. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This is the PC Engine Files, and today we are looking at Detana Twinbee, also known as Here Comes Twinbee, or if you live in Europe, it was known as Bells and Whistles in arcades. And if you lived in the United States, you didn't know it as anything at all because it didn't come out here. This is the 5th game in the Twinbee franchise overall, but only the 2nd one that came to arcades. The rest were home console exclusives. Now there's an interesting tidbit that's in the Wikipedia entry for Detana Twinbee that I can't actually confirm from the credits of this game, but according to Wikipedia, if you believe them, Koji Igarashi, the legendary Castlevania producer and director, worked on the enemy programming for this game. Why they didn't include him in the credits is beyond me, but if Wikipedia is right, this was one of the earliest things that he worked on while at Konami. And a lot of ports of this arcade game came out. First, the Sharp X68000, then PC Engine, which we're looking at here. Later, it was part of the Deluxe Pack for Sega Saturn and PlayStation, and the PlayStation version got re-released twice, first in 1997 under the Best for Family line, and then 2003 under the PS1 Books line. So it's going to be quite available if you live in Japan. A lot of different versions of it there. Less so outside of Japan. The first that it might have been available to anybody in this country was Wii's Virtual Console in North America, March 23rd, 2009. Thankfully, in the much more recent past, it has come out on Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 4 under the Hamster Corporation's Arcade Archive series. Those games usually run like $7.99 unless they're on sale, so if you like what you see here, you could always buy the arcade version and play that and have yourself a good time. Or you could track down the PC Engine version. And what, pray tell, does that go for right now? Well, let's do a live search as I'm doing the voiceover and find out. Detana Twinbee PC Engine, and we will sort from lowest to highest price. Let's see what we get. Price plus shipping lowest first, $26 for a loose hue card, $51 with free shipping for a complete copy, $34 with $20 shipping, $45 with $15 shipping. So it looks like if you want a complete copy, you're probably going to pay between $50 and $60. Is it worth that? Well, I guess that depends on if you're a Twinbee fan. I like this series of shooters, and I always have, and this is a very fun installment in the series. But let me tell you a little bit more about it, thanks to the Twinbee wiki on fandom.com, which is quite extensive, and it's very helpful to have somebody that summarizes the plot if I'm just playing this without having the complete in-box copy, or being able to read Japanese for that matter. Set several years after the first game, being the first arcade game and the first one that was ported to Famicom, among other places, Twinbee features Light and Pastel relaxing on an island when they get an SOS from the planet of Mel. The signal contains a message from Princess Melora, who begs for them to save her planet from the invading forces of an evil alien called Iva. So Twinbee and his friends set off to outer space to defeat the forces of Iva and save planet Mel. Now, in this game, it's not just Light and Pastel who are piloting Twinbee and Winbee, player 1 and player 2 respectively. There's also a mysterious Gwynbee that will appear. I don't know if it's quite random, but I only find Gwynbee when I die. And as you can see from the footage here, Gwynbee can be paired up with Winbee or Twinbee and act as a bonus shot. It's kind of like capturing a ship in Galaga and then retaking it back from the ship that captured it and getting a dual shooter. So you're upgrading your ship by combining Twinbee or Winbee with Gwynbee. And if you're two-player and you put Gwynbee between Twinbee and Winbee, you get a supercharged shot that clears all of the enemies on the screen. So co-op play can help you get a long way in this game. But the first level, at least, I was able to do it without a second player, and even without Gwynby a lot of the time, because you can hold down your fire button for a charged up shot, and then you can unleash it into whatever is coming at you, which you will see me do in this boss fight, even though I do have Gwynby here. But other times when I've played it, I have not had Gwynby, and it has been equally helpful to power up the shot. You just hold down your button until the meter gets to flashing, and then your charge shot is ready. And the charge shot is quite devastating. In fact, it's so powerful, it might make you mistakenly believe that Detana Twinbee is an easy game, but it gets much, much harder the further you go. The enemies get more and more relentless in their waves of attacks. There are more enemies on the ground, and you should switch back and forth between the 1 and the 2 button to do your regular shots and your bomb shots, because you can only take out the enemies on the ground with your bombs. It'll give you a targeting crosshair, and it'll generally aim in the direction that they are if you're even somewhat close when you hit the bomb. But if you're not paying attention, the ground enemies can take you out just as fast as the enemies on the top of the screen. So don't just ignore the ground enemies and shoot whatever's directly in front of you. Do so at your own peril. You should also want to collect the power-ups and bonus points that the ground enemies sometimes drop. You also get bonus points for taking out a whole wave of enemies. That gives you extra points. And of course, like previous Twinbee games, there is the juggling mechanic. And by that I mean, if you shoot at a cloud, a bell comes out. And if you juggle the bell by shooting it repeatedly, it changes color, and the colors represent different power-ups you can collect, like the shield that's currently around me, or shadow ships that are like the options from Gradius games, where you get extra firepower from the options following you, or you can increase your speed or decrease your speed by collecting certain colors. It goes in this order. The standard yellow bell gives bonus points, and if you collect multiple ones in a row, the bonus increases from 500 to 1,000 to 2,500 to 5,000 to 10,000 at the maximum. White gives you a double shot. Blue increases your speed. Black decreases your speed. Green gives you a mirror image for extra firepower. Red gives you a shield. And the purple gives you 3 tall shields that trace you and destroy aerial enemies or enemy bullets when they contact them. So that's your triple option, I guess. And I would say juggle those as much as you can for the bonus points and for the power-ups, because that is the key to winning at Twinbee in any of the games in this series. Well, except for like side-scrolling platforming games, but that's a little bit later down the line in the Twinbee legacy on Super Famicom. It's remarkable to me that games that are this accessible and easy to understand even without knowing Japanese were largely left alone for North America and Western audiences. I can only think that's because this falls into the cute-em-up genre, as they call it, and they thought it would just be too cute for hardcore North American United States Western gamers. It's not. The Twinbee series is awesome. They're some of the best shooters you can possibly play, and Detana Twinbee is no exception. Now, obviously, I need to work on my juggling skills, and I also need to work on memorizing the enemy patterns, because this is not the best playthrough of Detana Twinbee you will see. I did pretty good in the first stage, and I'm gonna fail miserably here in the second stage in a moment. But there are only so many stages in Detana Twinbee, and when you clear them all, it loops back around, except it gets a little harder. And when you complete the second loop, the game is over, although you can enter another credit and start again, as they say in the arcade version, or you can just play it again on the home console version, such as this. So bottom line for me is that out of all the games that I've played thus far, over 90 of them on the PC Engine files, Detana Twin Bee would be easily in my top 10 of among the best that you can possibly play. There are so many good games that I can't possibly rank it number one, but it does meet that perfect amount of it's expensive but not stupidly expensive, and it's fun but it's not stupidly easy nor stupidly hard. It's kind of the best of all worlds when it comes to PC Engine, so keep an eye out for Detana Twin Bee, or at least try it in emulation first. It's also available as a PlayStation Portable pack, and it also got converted to Xbox 360 Game Pass, but that's probably now defunct, but there are a lot of different versions of it out there. I'm Mr. MegaManFan, this is the PC Engine Files, and today we're looking at Off the Wall, an unreleased prototype by Takin for TurboGrafx 16. The only game that Takin officially published for TurboGrafx 16 is Clax, but they were working on this game for a lot of different systems besides the TurboGrafx. There's also a Sega Game Gear version among others, and as far as I know, none of them have officially come out, but all of them can be found at hiddenpalace.org. Now, there may be some confusion here due to the name Off the Wall and the fact that Takin was a subsidiary of Atari. There is an Off the Wall game for Atari 2600. That was developed by Axlon and published by Atari. This one was actually developed by Takin, a subsidiary of Atari. I know that's confusing. It's even more confusing given that they're both breakout clones, but the one on 2600 is rather primitive, and as you can see from this prototype, this is a lot more advanced, and probably would have been a really good game if they had finished it. What you've got here is a paddle that you move up and down with the D-pad, and you shoot a ball into these other three walls, and you're trying to ricochet it not just into the bricks to score points, but to eliminate enough bricks that you can get the ball into the exit. So there's some strategy involved here. You can't just break the bricks, you've got to get to the goal as well. But then again, maybe you don't want to get to the goal because you want to score more points, so you have to choose what you're trying to do. I imagine if this got a little further along in development, there would have been even more layers to this. Maybe you could have made the paddle go to one of the other walls instead of just up and down along one wall. If you could move to any wall and use it to rebound the ball, that would have been pretty interesting, especially since the gimmick seems to be that the wall that you're on doesn't have anything behind it, so the ball can't ricochet off that wall. So maybe you could keep that gimmick as the paddle moved around the entirety of the screen. Whatever wall the paddle is on, there's no wall there, so it's a risk-reward strategy. Like, you can switch walls, but then you have no backup. If you switch to that wall too late and the ball is already on its way there, it'll just sail right through. So you'd have to choose when to switch walls carefully. I also imagine they could have implemented some playfield enemies that would have hampered your ability to shoot the ball or knock it back toward you. It certainly seems like they had that in mind, because you just got that message on the screen that the flashing blocks are power-ups, but so far as I can tell, none of them actually do anything. I've not been able to hit a button to use the power-ups. Neither the 1 or the 2 button does anything, and I can't select them by pausing the game. I've tried, and really the only thing you can do other than play these demo levels is use the select button to switch to the next level. Like, if your level is fluky, if it doesn't work right, it'll just end the level and you can go to the next level. If you run out of lives and you just want to see the rest of the boards, you can hit it and it'll just go to the next level. So you can get a sneak peek of all the levels that they had implemented at the time this prototype was in development. And you'll notice that some are just missing altogether. Like, it'll randomly skip a number. Like, you'll get to 19 and suddenly it'll go to 21. So where was 20? Well, either it wasn't finished so they didn't put it in the prototype, or it was so buggy that they just took it out altogether. We don't know what those decision-making processes were. We don't have much insight into it because even the hiddenpalace.org entry is bereft of information. All it says is a prototype of the unreleased Off the Wall for TurboGrafx 16. It doesn't say anything about the programmers or developers or when it was found or how it was found. It just says there's a Game Gear version and a TurboGrafx 16 version, and that's it. Apparently, though, there's a second version of the off-the-wall prototype which has not been dumped, and that one gives us a little more information about the game. Now at least we know that the author is Jun Amanai, and if I'm pronouncing his last name wrong, I apologize for that. Quoting from hiddenpalace.org, this version is said to be farther along than the one that was dumped. The developer stated on his YouTube channel that the high projected cost combined with the lack of a volume type controller, meaning a paddle controller, that's what he's describing. You know, it would make sense to play a game like this with a paddle instead of a D-pad, but I digress. The lack of a volume type controller on TurboGrafx 16 was ultimately what sealed this game's fate. It is currently being sold on SaveJapan.com/shop for $6,800. And I'm guessing by the fact it's never been dumped, nobody was willing to pay $6,800 for an unreleased TurboGrafx 16 prototype that may or may not be more complete than the one that already exists. We have only his word to go on, and unless that dump is shown to other people like Frank Cifaldi or Jeremy Parrish or somebody that's in the dumping and preserving community that is active in this, that is taking care of this, even somebody from hiddenpalace.org, because, I mean, like I said at the beginning, this is where I got my prototype of Off the Wall from, so if they could at least look at a dump and compare it to the dump they have, we'd know how much further along it was. But I guess the seller would probably be afraid to do that, because if you let somebody look at it, even temporarily, if a copy remained, then the value of their prototype would no longer be worth $6,800. It would be worthless. But if the EEPROMs in it die, then it's going to be worthless anyway. That's the catch-22 of this thing, and why so many of these games need to be dumped and preserved now, while they still can be, before things go bad and the games no longer work anymore. Don't take that chance that it's going to last forever. Nothing lasts forever in this world. Even the preserved dumps may not last forever if the internet goes away. There's no such thing as certainty, but the more backups that exist and the more different places those backups exist, the better off we all are for the future longevity of some of these games. I guess the bottom line on Off the Wall is, it seems like they had something here. Maybe the paddle controller or the lack thereof is the reason why they didn't finish. Maybe it was going to be too expensive to manufacture the game on a Q card. I can't attest to either of those things, but I see, at least in this version, not speaking for the Game Gear version because I'm not playing that here, but I see in this version the potential for something good if they had kept at it, added different obstacles in the playfield with enemies, different types of bricks, if they had made it more flexible in the way that you controlled the paddle, with or without a paddle controller, mind you. If they had just tweaked a few more things, this could have been a good game. It seems like it would be limited in its sellability, if that's even a word though. And there's nothing here that's going to make this a flagship TurboGrafx game. There's no mascot character, there's no superb soundtrack, there's no identifying thing that's like, wow, we just gotta have another Breakout clone. Everybody run out and buy this game. There were so many already at this point. I mean, Breakout games go all the way back to the 1970s. Shortly after Pong came out in arcades was the first Breakout game. And Arkanoid was arguably the greatest refinement of that game to come along thanks to Taito in the 80s. So I'm not sure Off the Wall can compare to Arkanoid or any of the other more sophisticated breakout style games that had already been put out on the market by the early 1990s when this was in development. And that may be the real reason that Off the Wall was canceled. Not the lack of a volume controller, aka paddle, not the cost of producing the hue cards, but somebody at Tengen looked at the bottom line and said, are we really going to sell a lot of these? Is this going to be a huge hit for us? Are we going to sell more copies of this than Bonk's Adventure? Probably not. Why are we putting so much time and effort into this? The TurboGrafx 16 is barely a market in North America. PC Engine is on the decline compared to Super Famicom and the Mega Drive, so maybe we'll just stop right here and cut our losses. And so they did. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This has been the PC Engine Files with the prototype of Off the Wall. As always, thank you for liking, watching, sharing, subscribing, whatever you do to support the channel. Thank you. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This is the PC Engine Files, and today we are looking at Rabio Lepus Special. Now, if you go about it by conventional means, this isn't the easiest game to find information about. I was originally told that the title translated to Rabbit Punch when it was localized for arcades in North America, but if you look up Rabbit Punch, that just gives you a cartoon from the 1940s featuring Bugs Bunny and a character that would later be known in a more famous pro wrestling Bugs Bunny cartoon as the Crusher. So that is obviously not this game. But if you dig a little further, you can actually find an entry at Hardcore Gaming 101 that talks about the arcade history of this game. And it is more extensive than you would have guessed for such an otherwise obscure game. It was developed by V-System, later known as Video System, and then it was localized by Bally Sente, which was a imprint of Bally Midway, and Sente itself was the Sente arcade computer system owned by Nolan Bushnell before it merged with Bally, and Sente was actually a pioneer in the video game sphere, developing multi-cartridge arcade systems long before SNK had developed their Neo Geo system. So they deserve more credit than they get, but they also aren't very well remembered for it because a lot of their games were rather mediocre sports titles, and I guess they were trying to spice it up by getting the license to Rabbit Punch. According to this same article at Hardcore Gaming 101, that's probably what they were doing because shooters were getting very popular at this time in the 1980s, and since it was an obscure game in North America, the license to port it was rather cheap. And I guess I get the same feeling about this adaptation for PC Engine. Rather cheap. On the one hand, it does have a very Gradius and R-type feel, and on the other hand, it seems almost like a blatant rip-off of those, except with a rabbit as the protagonist instead of a spaceship, which is a really strange choice, but it's one that's at least plot-based. If you go to the Sonic Wings wiki, there's actually an entry for Rabio Lepus, so it's considered part of that series, believe it or not, and this is what they have to say that helps me make some sense of this game. In Rabio Lepus, you have to save the Princess of Bunnyland, whose name is Komomo Kirishirakawa, who's been kidnapped along with her sister Kotomi Kirishirakawa and their grandfather, the king, Taro Kirishirakawa. I really hope I didn't butcher that. I tried my best. The mechanical rabbits Rabio and Lepus are sent to rescue them by fighting enemies on a spaceship, an asteroid, and the home planet of the kidnappers themselves. Now, had I found this article before I played the game, I would have also learned that there are some cheat codes for the PC Engine adaptation that could have made this game a lot easier. For example, to get 6 credits at the start of the game, you hold select and press 1, 2, 2, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 2. To switch to expert mode, which definitely wouldn't make it easier, you hold select and press 1, 1, 2, 2. To enter yellow mode, you hold select and press 111 222 111 2222, and then you start off wearing the yellow ribbon power up. For blue mode, select and press 1 4 times, 2 4 times, 1 4 times, 2 4 times. Then you start off wearing the blue ribbon, which gives you stronger firepower. Green mode, it gives you a green ribbon where you fire shots ahead and behind. Usagi 5 mode gives you 5 lives instead of 3. Shield 5 mode gives you 5 shields instead of 3. And Shield 4 mode gives you 4 shields instead of 3. You can look all these things up at sonicwings.fandom.com/wiki/Rabio_Lepus. But just Google Rabio Lepus and you'll find this article, trust me, because like I said at the beginning, Wikipedia itself is not terribly helpful. They don't have this game. They don't have the North American localization of this game. They have no entries for Rabio Lepus whatsoever. Price charting also doesn't seem to know Rabio Lepus exists because I couldn't look it up. So I have to rely on eBay to find out what this game goes for if you want to pick up a copy yourself. And it's all over the map, but the best you can find for it loose is about $30 with $10 shipping from Japan. And if you want a complete copy, it looks like you're paying at least $60 even with free shipping. So not the most super rare PC Engine game on the market, but definitely not a common game either. Now, I'm torn on whether or not I want to recommend this game. There's a cuteness aesthetic to it that's borderline to being a cute 'em up, and that's not a bad thing in my eyes because I like games like Parodius and Fantasy Zone and Twin Bee, among others. I think cute 'em ups are just fine, but it feels like they didn't go all in. They just said, okay, here's a rabbit, and we'll put the power-ups inside boxes with carrots on them, but then we'll just make it a traditional shoot 'em up, and one with some very brutal and cheap deaths. You can get hit by things that you have no time to anticipate. Enemies who enter the screen from the left side when you're all the way over to the left trying to shoot enemies on the right. Stage layouts where you have to avoid the walls of the stage and then you go right into enemy fire when you're trying to avoid them. There's very, very little forgiveness if you don't memorize the stage layouts, and I guess that's okay. I don't mind the memorization, but I also would question whether or not you want to spend $30 to $60 for something you have to memorize like a quiz to be able to give all the answers back at the correct time. Is that fun? It depends. For some people, yes. If you absolutely love the shoot 'em up genre, that's probably right up your alley. And if you're a filthy casual, then maybe you wouldn't want something like Rabio Lepus. I wouldn't call it the hardest of shoot 'em up games, cute 'em up or shoot 'em up, but I would also not say it's super easy either. It's a delicate balance to say that Rabio Lepus is okay. It's not great. It's not something I would say go out of your way to get. I would say if you came across it and it was at a bargain price, then perhaps consider it. But for me, this one definitely falls into the try before you buy category. You might not like the visual style of Rabio Lepus. It might be too cute for you. You might not like all the cheap deaths that are seemingly unavoidable. And the fact that the rabbit can punch things when he gets close to them is an interesting gimmick, but not enough so to differentiate itself from other shooters or make up from the cheapness of some of the stage layout and design. I think if you try it first in emulation, you will really be able to get a feel for whether or not this is the kind of thing that you want to spend $60 on. For me, I'm going to say no. If it came in a lot on eBay of multiple PC Engine games, and I wasn't paying a high price for each one, but getting all of them collectively as a group, maybe. but then that would be hard to do since I have a lot of games anyway, so buying a lot just means unnecessary duplicates I would have to trade or resell, and that's just a pain. Rabio Lepus Special is not as special as the name makes it out to be. As far as shooters go, it's just somewhere in the middle. Even the Hardcore Gaming 101 article about the game takes exception to the idea that this version was called Special when it was ported to PC Engine. They're like, what was special about it? Okay, some of the stages are longer, but some of the graphics have been downgraded significantly, so buyer beware if you were looking for a one-to-one arcade port. I'm Mr. MegaManFan, this is the PC Engine Files, and today we are looking at The Legend of Tonma, which for a variety of reasons I will never own a physical copy of. I'm accepting that, I'm okay with that, and I'm about to tell you why. First of all, this is one of the last 3 HuCard games released for TurboGrafx 16 in North America. Legend holds that you couldn't even get this one physically in stores. It was only available as a mail-in order to Turbo Technologies Incorporated. So needless to say, it's a short print run game, copies are exceedingly scarce, and they fetch outrageous prices. A loose copy, not box, not complete, a loose HuCard for TurboGrafx 16 goes for $453. So, you could buy a Super HD System 3 Pro for less than that, for $319.99. And that would get you the entire library of games for PC Engine. TurboGrafx games, PC games, CD games, Super Graphics games. With the HD Pro, you could play every single game in existence for less than what it would cost you to buy one loose HuCard. And if you really want to get outrageous, if you want it complete in the box, then you're going to shell out $1,100. And if you want it new and never opened, and I can't imagine why, $1,400. Are you prepared to spend those kind of prices to own one PC Engine or TurboGrafx game? If you've got Bill Gates money, I suppose you are, but if you're like me, probably not. There's another reason that I'm not worried about not ever owning this game. It is ridiculously hard. And it's a good kind of hard. I like the challenge. I like playing it. I keep coming back to it again. But it is punishing. You get hit once, you're done for. Maybe twice if you have a power-up, but you die very easily. And the enemies spam you in a way that I can only compare to Ghosts and Goblins, because you don't just kill them and move on. They regenerate. If you turn around, they're there. If you move forward and don't stop, they're there. Anytime you think you've cleared the path is only clear for a second. And if you're busy trying to deal with one enemy in front of you and another one is coming from behind you, you're kind of screwed. You're going to end up taking a hit and dying no matter what. Now, the game is fairly generous with the continues. I haven't run out of them, but what will be your downfall will be your severe frustration at wanting to continue, knowing that you're going to get hammered again and again. You're going to go, is it worth it? Do I really want to do this? And you'll probably quit out of frustration. Then you'll remember that it was kind of fun for a little bit, and you'll come back and play it again, and you'll quit in frustration again when you get killed repeatedly over and over. That's the cycle I go through with Legend of Tonma. It's fun for a little bit, and then it gets old, and then I go and play something else, and then I come back to it later. I can't justify $450 on that. Maybe you can, I can't. As for the actual factuals about this game, It was developed by IREM. I remember them. Oh wait, no I don't. I'm sure that Ryan appreciates that JonTron joke. But you control a caped hero named Tommy, or Tonma I guess, depending on the region. And he's on a quest to rescue a princess. What a trope! Is Mario Brothers familiar to you much? Anyway, Tommy can throw fireballs to dispatch enemies and jump on their heads to stun them, but as I noted, he still gets killed with one touch, maybe two. So those fireballs aren't helping him very much because if they don't hit the target and you get hit, you don't have any kind of shield or invincibility or life bar, you're toast. Now, this game was available a few other ways than the physical version. It was released on the Wii Virtual Console in North America on September 24, 2007, delisted for some reason in 2012, returning in 2013, so it was available until the Wii shop closed. The PAL regions got it on September 28, 2007, and I guess it was never pulled from the Wii shop there. At least I can't find proof that it was. And if you want the Japanese version, that is a little more reasonable in price than the North American version. $106 loose, $112 complete, so almost virtually no difference. You might as well get it complete in box if you're going that route. And $410 new and never opened. But still, you're sinking over $100 into a very hard game. Maybe, just maybe, consider playing this in emulation or on an EverDrive or a Super SD or a Super HD System 3. I'm not telling you to pirate a game, I'm telling you to try a game. Because if you try it and you don't like it, you're saving yourself anywhere from $100 to $450. This is also another object lesson in why video game preservation matters, because most people will not be able to afford $100 or $450 for this game. So if somebody doesn't preserve it and all the physical copies eventually go dead, the few that are known to exist and out there in the hands of collectors, then this game would be lost to time forever unless somebody dumped the ROM and kept a copy of it for future generations. It's exactly why I believe it was Uncle Derek from Stop Skeletons from Fighting who said this. When video game preservation is outlawed, only outlaws will preserve video games. I suppose that makes guys like Frank Cifaldi outlaws, but if he is, he's my kind of outlaw. He's the wild, wild west of video games, and I appreciate his rootin' tootin' cowboy attitude about it, because we don't want to lose these games. Even hard, difficult games like Legend of Tonma. Even bad games like the Blaster Master WiiWare game that Uncle Derek talked about. You know, it's those kind of games that if they're going to disappear forever, somebody needs to find a way to preserve them. If the digital shop goes defunct, if all the physical copies stop working, if the discs rot, if the cartridges corrode, somebody needs to find some way to keep the legacy of these games alive. Legend of Tonma isn't what I would call a bad game. It's not badly designed. It's not like it's not fun. It's just stupidly hard and stupidly expensive. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. Thanks for watching. I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and today on the PC Engine Files, we are looking at Chibi Maruko-Chan Quiz de Pihyara. Now, first, I need to explain what Chibi Maruko-Chan is, because I'm sure you're probably mystified by that name if you're not a follower of anime and Japanese culture. And even if you are, it's possible that this is still on the obscure side, because it's not aimed for an older audience. It actually started out as a manga, and it had quite a long run from August of 1986 to December of 2018, so I think it's fair to say it was very popular in its country of origin. It also got adapted to an anime which ran for 142 episodes, which is a fairly significant amount if you ask me, but the actual TV run was pretty short, only 1990 to 1992. It also got adapted into several films and a second television series that had a much longer run from January 8th of 1995 all the way to the present day. So even though the manga has been discontinued, the anime lives on. What exactly is going on in this series? Well, it's about a girl who's called Momoko Sakura, but everybody calls her Maruko for short. She's a troublemaker, she's a bit of a tomboy, and it's called a slice of life, if you know that term, which means showing somebody in their everyday situations how they deal with them and how conflicts are resolved, the adventures they get into, the things they do, their friends, their family, etc. So this is all based on this, what I would call franchise, this very large Chibi Maruko-Chan pantheon of things, movies, films, manga, anime. It's quite large, even if you've never heard of it before. It has a significant following. The game takes inspiration from all of these things and makes you, Maruko, the protagonist, participate in a quiz game show. Only this quiz game show is executed in a really strange way. What you're doing is beating up enemies in a side-scrolling, almost belt action way, a little bit platformer, but you're not really going up and down platforms. But you are bopping enemies on the head by jumping on them or throwing energy balls at them to make them disappear. But you're not doing this just because they're opposing you. You're doing it because they hold quiz answers, and you need to collect those quiz answers by crouching down, and when you do, it answers the trivia question on the screen at the time. Now, unless you can read Japanese, this is going to be extremely frustrating. I don't know if there's a romhacking.net patch. I'm not sure I would actually go out of my way to download it and apply it, even if one does exist, because I have a feeling the questions are very culturally based, just like the game itself is very culturally based. So even if the questions were in English, you still probably wouldn't be able to answer them without an extensive knowledge of the Japanese culture and possibly the history of the manga and the show, if any of the questions are also based on that as well. So this puts me in the awkward position of trying to grade a game that's not for me and probably not for a lot of you watching it either. And I have to be entirely fair and say that I can't, because it's probably a perfectly good game for its intended audience, and we're not that. So I will instead grade the mechanics and say it could be done in a less innovative but more user-friendly way. I like the idea of trying to make it not the typical quiz game that you see on PC Engine or so many other consoles of the era. They tried to do something new, but in reality, the best quiz games that you actually want to play keep it really simple by not making you have to kill enemies to collect the answers to the trivia questions. You just hit up for 1, down for 2, left for 3, right for 4, or whatever button combination they choose. You don't have to do a video game mechanic where you defeat enemies to answer the trivia questions. I mean, it's still kind of a cool idea in theory, especially if it got really esoteric. Like, let's say instead of dropping the answers to the questions, the different enemies on the screen looked like the trivia question answers, and when you bop the right one on the head, that would be the answer to the question. So instead of A, B, or C, or D, it would be like, look at this thing on the screen. It looks like an orange. And the question was, which of these items has a high concentration of vitamin C? So you wouldn't jump on the pasta and you wouldn't jump on the hamburger. You would jump on the orange. I mean, that's kind of an innovative way to go about things, but I'm not sure collecting A, B, and C, and D from the items that you have to answer the trivia questions with is the right way to go. It's trying to be innovative for an unnecessary reason. It's innovation for the sake of innovation and not because it actually makes the game better or smoother to play. I'm sure this was a design decision to get people invested in the fact that it was an adaptation of the manga and anime. Like, we can't just have her doing something static. She's got to be active. We've got to represent her on the screen so that the players can connect with the game and what they're doing. Fair play. I'm not knocking them for that. I'm just saying, as specifically a trivia game, it's not the best way to present a trivia game, but it's admirable. And I think this whole thing can be boiled down to they were trying to do something, and I'm sure that the intended audience appreciates it. I'm not the intended audience, and it doesn't mean I don't appreciate it. It just means the replay value is pretty low, and even with an English language patch, it would probably not get much higher. So, in summary, Chibi Maruko-Chan Quiz to Pihyara is interesting. Not bad. Not necessarily good, unless you're Japanese and it's made for that audience. Then you might be thinking it's good or above average. I don't know. I have no read on how that audience feels about this game, but I suspect it has a cultural cachet given the success of the Chibi Maruko-Chan franchise. So it's a good game for the right person, probably a younger person. I have to imagine the trivia questions are aimed at the demographic of the show, the manga, the movies. So the trivia questions are probably pretty simple, and maybe that wouldn't be interesting to older players. Younger players, perhaps. It's going to be something that you don't necessarily need to own as a PC Engine or TurboGrafx enthusiast. And it doesn't look to be a very affordable game either. You're going to shell out a decent amount of money if you actually want to own a physical copy of this game. I think the lowest price I saw for it was $30. So if you want a quiz game that you can't play unless you're Japanese and you're willing to fork out $30, more power to you. That would not be my preference, but I'm not judging. If you're going for a complete collection, it's certainly not the most expensive, but it's definitely not inexpensive. And so I leave you with one final thought. I'd probably rather read the manga or watch the anime than play this game. And if either of those have had an English translation and a North American publisher, I'll look into it at some point. But even then, it may just not be my demographic, and I'm fine with that. Not everything is for everybody. But if quiz games are your thing, perhaps for a Japanese reader and speaker, this would be alright. Otherwise, I would say proceed with caution. Chibi Maruko-Chan, definitely not a game for everyone. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This has been the PC Engine Files. Like, comment, and subscribe. It helps the channel grow. Sharing the videos never hurts either. I thank you for watching. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. Today on the PC Engine Files, we'll take a look at a couple of accessories for your TurboGrafx, or more specifically in this case, the Turbo Express, as this is a power supply made specifically by Retro Game Cave for portable systems such as this. It's better than using a multi-prong power adapter that's not the exact voltage. Many of them only do 6, 7.5, or 9. This gives you exactly the 7 volts you need. And what do I have running in my Turbo Express? Why, it's none other than an EverDrive made by Crix. You should know his fine line of products. They're available for almost every retro game system you can imagine, and I have preloaded some ROMs into this, including Impossible, which came as a bonus with the purchase of this EverDrive through Stone Age Gamer. More on that in a little bit. As you can see, the EverDrive is functioning perfectly in my Turbo Express using my Retro Game Cave power supply, but let's flip it over and take a look at the actual EverDrive itself inserted into the back of my Turbo Express. Now at first it's going to be upside down until I rotate things here. As you can see, it's got the branding on it, a custom-made shell from Stone Age Gamer. If you buy it from Crix directly, you'll get a bare board. There's a PC Engine to TurboGrafx adapter switch on there so you can set the region, micro SD card slot at the top, and a reset button right there in the middle. That's key. You'll see a little bit of that in a second. First, let me tell you what you need to do to set this up. You go to the official Crix website. That's Crix with 2 Z's, KRIKZZ.com. Click on Turbo EverDrive V2, scroll down, and find the latest operating system. This is assuming you've already purchased it through Stone Age Gamer, through his website, whatever the case may be. If you've got the latest version of the EverDrive, you want version 2 of the operating system. Unzip that folder, and you should get a folder named TBED. You're going to drop this entire folder into a formatted micro SD card. It can be FAT32 or whatever you prefer. Just make sure the entire folder is in the root directory, because that's what the EverDrive needs to run. Actually, I suspect it doesn't even need the GIF file, but you definitely need the operating system PC Engine file in a folder named TBED. Now, here's what you get. PC Engine and TurboGrafx 16 support, FAT32 file system as previously mentioned, micro SD cards can be as large as 32 gigabytes, Street Fighter 2 mappers are supported, the reset button which I showed you previously, 4 megabytes of onboard RAM, and do note that if you have region modded your TurboGrafx 16 or your Turbo Express, it may cause some compatibility issues. As I have not, every PC Engine file that I use, whether it's a TurboGrafx 16 HUE card or a Japanese HUE card, they all just boot up right away in my Turbo Express or my TurboGrafx 16. And what's really sweet about this is if you're playing something and it doesn't suit your fancy, or you're just bored and would like to quickly switch to something else, just reach your hand around the back of the Turbo Express and hit that reset button. Obviously, if this isn't a TurboGrafx 16, you're going to have to get up and push the button manually. But if you own a Turbo Express, this feels tailor-made for quick and easy gameplay. Just hit that button and it will take you right back to the menu of ROMs that you were previously in, and you can select a different game. It's too bad it doesn't also work as a save state button like the GB X7 for Game Boy, but perhaps a future iteration of this EverDrive would be able to support save states. This is already version 2 of the Turbo EverDrive. Crix is always evolving and making new and better versions of his EverDrive products, so stay tuned. There may be a later update with save states and extra features that I can't even possibly fathom as of the recording of this review. Now, you see me playing Keith Courage in Alpha Zones, which is not an easy thing to do, looking through the lens of a camera and playing at the same time, but I feel like I actually did reasonably well platforming there, so let's reset it and go to something else. How about Air Zonk, the shoot-'em-up sequel to the Bonk's Adventure games, spin-off if you prefer to call it that. It's Bonk as Zonk in the future doing side-scrolling shooting at various waves of enemies, and shooters are something that TurboGrafx and PC Engine has always done right up there with the best of any console on the market. So this is a great entry in the library, albeit a rather expensive one. So maybe if you want to try it on authentic hardware, this might be a way to go, because the EverDrive itself is certainly more affordable than a lot of the PC Engine and TurboGrafx 16 library. Gives you a way to sample these games on real hardware. I got mine through Stone Age Gamer, as previously mentioned. You can see the cost difference there between the EverDrive and the Super HD System 3, but keep in mind, this cannot play Super Graphics games, this cannot play CD-ROM games, it can only play Hue cards. That's not a huge limitation, given that the vast majority of the PC Engine and TurboGrafx 16 library was on Hue cards. CD-ROM games came along much later in the lifespan of both systems, but if you want that full library of everything and the kitchen sink, obviously you go for a Super HD System 3 or the previous iteration, the SD System 3, depending on your budget and your television. That will decide what you want. And of course, Super Graphics support is limited to the HD System 3. So if that's something that you really want, then you're going to have to get the more powerful system with the HD output. The power supply came from Retro Game Cave. The PC Engine forum that I belong to on Facebook recommended them for custom power adapters, and I got my order really fast. I placed it and had it in about 4 days with shipping, even though it says it may take a while on their website. It actually took almost no time at all, especially compared to a lot of things I get off eBay or Amazon. So thumbs up to Retro Game Cave, thumbs up to Stone Age Gamer. They both shipped out really fast. And if you have a Turbo Express, I can't recommend this combination of products enough. It will save you a lot of money on batteries, and it will save you a lot of heartache if you buy games that you didn't like. You can try them out first on the Turbo EverDrive instead of plunking down $100 for a game you might not like and being stuck with it. Try before you buy, and an EverDrive is a great way to try it on real hardware. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This has been the PC Engine Files. Like, share, subscribe, and thank you for watching. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This is the PC Engine Files, and for episode 100, we're doing something that's not normally done on this series, a sports game. This one is called Taking It to the Hoop. As the name implies, it is a game about basketball. A game that is considered so unimportant, it doesn't even warrant a Wikipedia entry. Even TV Sports Basketball, the only other North American basketball game for TurboGrafx 16, that got a Wikipedia entry. Probably because it was also on Commodore Amiga, MS-DOS, and Commodore 64, so it got more widespread exposure than Taking It to the Hoop did. But there is actually more than one basketball game for TurboGrafx 16, and this is the lesser known of the two. Now, you might ask, why does a system known for shooters and platformers and a few role-playing games and some Zelda knockoffs like Newtopia, what does it even need with a basketball game? Well, if you had a console in the 80s or the 90s, it was pretty much a given that you would have one of every sports game on your system. You'd have a football game, a baseball game, a basketball game, a hockey game, and a soccer game. It was just the way things were done. You were supposed to appeal to every demographic by having a sports game for each different subset of the populace. Whatever sport they were into or enjoyed most, there had to be a video game just for them. So what's the history of this game that merits no Wikipedia entry? I'll do my best to fill in the gaps and tell you. First thing you need to know is it was developed by ICOM, A-I-C-O-M. They were a subsidiary of Sammy Industry from 1992 to 1996, and then broke off and became part of SNK when they merged with them to become Yubi Kobo, producing mostly games for SNK platforms, but that's neither here nor there. Suffice it to say, they had a very short history of being independent, and they actually went defunct in 2001. I guess they just got absorbed altogether into SNK at that time. They've got a few games on various different systems that you may or may not recognize. The legendary Axe on TurboGrafx 16, that's a pretty good one. The Moffat Conspiracy on NES, which was also known as Golgo 13, The Riddle of Icarus over in Japan. Saint Dragon on TurboGrafx 16, another pretty decent game. Blaster Master Boy on Game Boy. Interesting that that wasn't made by Sunsoft. And Polestar on Neo Geo and Neo Geo CD. Those are some of the more notable games developed by ICOM, but a lot of them are either exclusive to Japan or you have never even heard of them, or both. Now, this game did get a Japanese release where, funnily enough, it was called USA Pro Basketball. I guess in each market they were trying to indicate who it was for by calling it Taking It to the Hoop in the US. They were trying to get edgy and street. They used the hyphen. They didn't say taking to the hoop. They said taking it to the hoop. Just like you're taking it to the streets. Sorry, I'll stop singing now. Anyway, calling it USA Pro Basketball in Japan was a way to indicate, hey, this is a game about North American US style basketball, NBA basketball. But of course, this is not a licensed NBA game, so there are no actual NBA teams or NBA players, no logos for them, no character names, no graphics for those teams. You've just got generic teams that are from Chicago, Dallas, Seattle, Miami, Boston, so on and so forth. And to that degree, I have to say, it doesn't really matter which team you take or play as. They all tend to play exactly the same. I mean, it gives you options. It lets you insert or take people out of the lineups, but I've never noticed that it makes any difference. It also lets you choose whether you want to play zone defense or man-to-man. Again, I don't find that it makes a huge amount of difference. It seems to play relatively the same no matter what options you pick, no matter what team you use, because it's a very simple basketball game. And by nature, it has to be. I mean, you've only got select, start, 1 and 2. There's not a whole lot of extra buttons to do a lot of extra things with. So you can use one button to pass the ball, you can use one button to jump and shoot the ball, or if you're close enough to the hoop, you can take it to the hoop and do a slam dunk as long as you hit it right in the sweet spot. There's a meter that goes back and forth. You got to hit it right in the middle. Same if you get fouled and you have to shoot a free throw, you have to hit the meter in the middle to make your free throw switch through the net. It's simple enough. It's effective enough. It's not anything extraordinary. To me, this is like a slightly, depending on your point of view, more or less advanced double dribble for NES. It's around that level of competence without the hilarious vocal recording, double dribble. There's none of that here. In fact, there's no voice acting of any kind, and the sound effects are pretty minimalistic. There's a sound for the ball going through the hoop. There's some sounds like the whistle for a foul, and the music just gets repetitive and annoying after a little bit of time. Not to the point where you're like, I don't want to listen to it. My God, my ears are bleeding. But nothing that you'll hum along to later like, wow, I really remember that music from Taking It to the Hoop. It was so good. It's not. It's just, it's bland and it's repetitive and there's no way to change it. There are no options for it. I probably forgot to mention that when you're on defense, you can use those same two buttons that you use for pass and shoot to either switch to the player closest to the ball or to attempt a steal. The computer-controlled AI will, of course, try to do the same things to you, unless you're fortunate enough to have a second TurboGrafx 16 controller and a second player to go head-to-head against you, which probably would make this game a little more fun. Perhaps somebody can come up with a way for an emulator to do this over the internet, but then you'd have to have two people interested in playing Taking It to the Hoop at the same time out of millions, billions of people in the world, and I'm going to suspect the chance of any two people wanting to play head-to-head on Taking It to the Hoop at the same time is really low. I think you could find much more people playing Pac-Man 99, World of Warcraft, Tetris, anything else other than Taking It to the Hoop. This is just not a very big game. It's not a very successful game. It's just a game that exists and rises to the bare minimum level of competence that would be required for a basketball game on a console of the 8 to 16-bit generation. It's not special. Although, in terms of the price point, you might argue that it's somewhat special. I don't know that I would call it super special, but hey, at least if you're looking to fill out a TurboGrafx 16 library, it's not necessarily something that's going to break the bank and cause you to go completely nuts. $9 loose, $13 complete, $20 new. Which also, that says to me, if you're reading those numbers, that says to me they made a lot of copies of this game thinking it would sell. It didn't sell really well, and the stocks are still plentiful even today, decades after the game was originally released. So you might want to start with this one if you're looking to build out a TurboGrafx 16 library, because in the end, despite bland music and generic sound effects and gameplay that borders on mildly tedious to downright, I don't need to play this game again for a while, at least it's competent enough that it doesn't feel like it's a waste of a hue card. This is acceptable. I think that's the highest compliment I can pay it. If you're looking to play a basketball game on TurboGrafx/PC Engine, this might be your best bet. In fact, some reviewers say this is, of the two basketball games released for the system in North America, the preferable of the two. So, cheap price, best of a bad bunch. It seems like this is worth adding to a TurboGrafx 16 library if you're trying to fill one out. Especially when at the far end of this spectrum, you've got complete games that go for hundreds of dollars or more. Start here. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This has been the PC Engine Files 100 episodes. Like, share, and subscribe, and maybe we'll be around for another 100. Thanks for watching. See you next Tuesday. And of course, new content every single day.